Hello, everyone. It's Friday. It's midday, which means one thing only. It's Wow Ergonomics. Thank you so much for joining us, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. You may be celebrating today, or you may be commiserating, depending upon your political party persuasion of choice. I hope all of us just seeing whatever happens next as an opportunity. That's probably the best way to look at these sort of things. You'll notice that Stephen isn't here today. Stephen is in Holland again. He's doing one of his special Holland trips. So today I've got the wonderful Deb with me. Um, Hi. We've talked several times, sort of by text on LinkedIn, but we've never actually met before. So thank you so
Yeah,
much for coming to do this. Um, Tell
thank
us
you
a
for
little bit about
inviting me.
you. Well, that's an absolute pleasure. Tell us a little bit about you. I know
Okay.
already that she has a horse, and I also know that she. We've already talked about the fact that if you have a horse, it's a massive commitment, and you do need to have, brave it and go out in all weathers to feed the said horse and look after said horse. Um, and we've also talked about the misconception that if you do have a horse, that you're incredibly rich, because we know that's completely the opposite. But yeah, tell us about you.
Okay, so I'm Deb. I'm 60 next year, so getting towards that part of life where you need to think about what's going to happen afterwards. I'm beyond two marriages, but live with my partner. He's got a daughter, I've got a son and a daughter, both grown and flown, both getting married this year, and I'm going to be a grandma in October. So
Oh,
lots of exciting stuff
congratulations!
going on. Yeah. I've had a
Yeah.
very patchwork career. I left university and went into the corporate world, which kept me occupied for a long time, and which I ended up effectively getting thrown out of in my early 40s as a survivor of domestic abuse. So spent a few years as a homeless, penniless single mum doing three jobs, working nights in the nursing homes, days as a mystery shopper, and weekends as a bricklayer's labourer. So I've done
Wow.
lots of different things, and came to what I do now as a will writer about 5 years ago, just
Mm.
purely by chance. I was in recruitment and hated it. I was rubbish at it. I'm not ashamed to admit. Plenty of people admit the same. And to get my stats up, I called a guy who was advertising for a will writer, got there, talked about it, and thought, this is what I'm meant to do. And within a week, I'd done the transfer across. And although I've moved between different companies as I've got more experienced and more qualified and more picky, I guess, I still love what I do. I think it's a thing that we're rubbish at talking about, and the more I can get people to talk about it, the better. So I go
Oh,
out and do talks on it. I'm at a WI Women's Institute group on Monday, retirement homes next Friday, talking about it just on a light-hearted manner because we do get asked some very odd questions. Just to try and get people to get over it, really.
yeah.
So that's
Uh,
me.
We obviously talk an awful lot on this show because it's called Wow Ergonomics about well-being, sort of staff well-being, and with that, physical well-being, mental health well-being,
Yeah.
etc., etc. But um, I suppose a lot of people in the gamut of that, if they're thinking about well-being, they're thinking about being alive.
Yes.
They don't necessarily think about what comes next. However, having said all of that, actually, do we not preoccupy ourselves a lot in terms of thinking about what ifs? And actually,
Yes.
do you find that when as you've kind of got to know more about this, as you've done it for longer and you've had the conversations, do you actually find that there's a lot of stress, anxiety, relationship problems, whatever, that are actually caused by not knowing or not planning for the future?
Yeah. I mean, it may be a massive generalization, but when it comes to this area, a lot of people are more on the pessimistic than the optimistic side. And there is a lot of stress caused by, it's a bit like going to the dentist. Everybody assumes that sorting this stuff out is going to be worse than it is. And the dread of getting started is what stops people. And it gets pushed to the bottom of the list. And they always say, oh, it's because we've got other really important things to do. And it's not, deep down inside, it's because they're afraid of it. Or they're afraid of the process, particularly couples, particularly what are strangely called blended families, where people have got kids from different previous relationships. And so what I do is I talk to people about the level of smugness. And when you can reach that level of smugness that goes, we've ticked that box, we're proper adults now, we've done it, and we can put it away for a few years, and we know the circumstances under which we need to look at it again, but hey, it's done. And that's what I aim for.
Can I start with, before we even get on to, we're going to, before we even get on to people that haven't done their will or haven't even thought about doing a will, etc. One of the things that amazes me is, and I don't know whether this is a generational thing or not, is from my own experience, is trying to get your parents to talk, if they've made a will, to talk about what they've actually done. It's almost as though, I mean, I look, no one wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to say, okay, look, you're getting on, therefore let's talk about what happens when you shuffle off this mortal coil. But just even sort of practical things, like I've had the conversations with my parents about, well, where is it? I mean, you say you've done a will, but where physically is it? Where do I and my sister find it when you've gone, right? And is there anything that, and things like funeral arrangements and things like that? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want this, that? Yeah, who would you like it? And there seems to be some people, I'm sure, just are like, yep, I'm going to talk to the moon and back about it, etc. But I find personally, and if you're listening, parents, come on, that it's just, they just don't want to talk about it. It's like, we've done that, and it's like, yeah, but all these little things. And even I would say as well, even outside of wills, other little things like, I tried to have a conversation with my dad the other day about, he's over 80 now, and he said to me, I probably I'll have to renew my driving license again in a couple of years, and I probably won't bother. And I said, well, so what are you going to do with your car? I don't know. It's just like, just all of these conversations, and they are stressful. They're stressful because people don't want to open up, they don't want to talk about it, etc. And if only people had it sort of written down somewhere, and and actually did discuss it, it would just be so much easier. Do you find all that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's two different circumstances, right? From the parents' point of view, this is going to sound odd, they often don't want to talk, they don't want to raise the subject with their children because their children will realize they're going to die one day, and they don't want to upset them, so they don't want to have the conversation. From the children's point of view, they don't want to start the conversation, because what do? They don't want to appear to be money grabbing or trying to work out if they're going to be wealthy in future. They don't want to go like, hey, mum, dad, are you leaving me any money in your will? And they think that's how the parents are going to view it. So it's two opposites, really, that mean that they don't talk about it at all. And aside from being a will writer, I'm a coach and an NLP practitioner, so I understand about all this, all these beliefs that people have, and these fears and getting over them. And I would say, when I go business networking, a question a lot of people say to me is, how do I start a conversation with my parents? How do I say to them, if you died tomorrow, I wouldn't know where to start finding everything. And it's you can just starting that conversation with, oh, somebody said to me the other day that I should ask you this, because then you're giving them responsibility. You're not thinking about it. Someone's told you that I should ask you about where your important documents are and what you've got. And then it's that first sentence that opens the discussion. And then you know if your parents are going to be willing to discuss it or not. And some parents won't. They just don't want to. And I'm afraid there's very little you can do apart from encourage them to try and get organised and keep stuff in a place where you can find it and at least you know what it is. You know, I always say to people, if you're going to keep your important documents in a safe, please make sure somebody else can get into the safe.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
When my dad died, we got no idea whether this was years ago before I even entered this industry. We got no idea where his and mum's wills were. They told us they'd done them. So then we found their copies. Then we've got to make sure the solicitors they'd used, who'd got their originals, were still there. Had they been taken over by anyone else? Had they still got the will and stuff like this? And I think when people have got over that and gone, right, okay, we can start, then you can open it up and then you can do things, because some things need to be done before they've gone. You know, people these days, they don't just roll over and die in their sleep, unfortunately. They may get ill, they need to be cared for, they need their wishes carried out on their behalf, their money managed and stuff. So it's getting younger and younger when people have got to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Are there or have there been any changes, or what's the sort of legal position in terms of, you see, because it would make an awful lot of sense to me if, as a parent, produced a will. If I went and made my will tomorrow, I'd want to, the elder children, I'd want to, they've got emails now, they've got, one of them's got a house. I'd want to immediately copy them in, if you know what I mean, in the proceedings. Is there a way of actually doing that? Can you do that, or does it have to just sit between you and the solicitor until you die, and it relies on you to make sure that the children are involved? Or can the solicitor or whoever's producing the will actually get involved in saying, right, okay, so these are the dependents on this, etc., so let's get them involved?
Yeah, I always encourage people, because people say, they have to decide things like, who are the executors, who's going to manage all this after I go, and they can write that down and not tell anyone, so that their eldest kids, I mean, I'm the youngest, my brother's the eldest of 5, we're the executors for mum and dad's wills. No idea how the rest of the family feel about that, but it was their decision and that's got to be respected. But I always encourage them to, because they may put stuff in there and the kids don't want to be executors, or they don't understand what it is. So, even when people agree to store their wills with us, we still send them their copy back. We still send them details back of where it is that they can give to their executors or give to whoever. And actually, one of my clients is absolutely fabulous. And her and her mate got together with just this in mind, and said, actually, do our kids know all about all of this stuff? And they produced this beautiful little book, which I give to my clients as a thank you. And it's called My Life Book. And it's small enough to fit in a safe.
Yep.
And what you do is you fill in the stuff that people need to know in advance.
Isn't that
and it's
brilliant?
Designed to be pretty, so you can give it as a gift. But then at least people know. And there's more and more ways of doing that these days. But I think it's really important because, I've also got power of attorney for my mum. She's still got all her own marbles. We only use it for the remote stuff that she doesn't want to get involved with, like a bank account. But part of that is, what does she want? to happen to her money? Does she want her charitable contributions to continue if she loses her marbles? Does she still want to give out the gifts that she does? How does she want to be looked after? It's important to have those conversations early. And I think, I certainly advise my clients to make sure that they've had these discussions and that their kids know what they're up for, what's going to happen. And same with younger people. They nominate guardians for their kids. So who would look after their kids if they went away on a romantic weekend and didn't come back? But you should never do that stuff without telling people.
Yeah. You see, again, I actually think that we're missing out a major part of this within business as well, because I honestly believe that we now have we have pension schemes within companies, and we have pension contributions, etc. at work. But a lot of that, I'm going to say, a lot of the time, from a lot of companies, it's just kind of a tick box exercise, etc. And I just think as we go forward, if companies are really invested in the well-being of their staff, they actually need to get involved in this stuff long term.
Yeah. And that's something that I've been working with other people on. So a couple of weeks ago, myself and a financial advisor, we were talking to one of our local employers who really do care about their employees. One of the first ones to implement a 4-day week, who were always forward thinking. And we said, well, why don't we come in? So they invited us in. We came in and we did one session in the morning, one in the afternoon, talking about the circumstances in which people need to think about this stuff. So are you saving for your first house? Have you just got married? Have you just got kids? Are you planning your retirement? And then opened it up. So we were there all day and people could just take turns to come in and ask us anything they wanted. No charge, just ask us whatever you want. Great for us in getting to know these people, and a certain number of them might need our services. But also they were so grateful for their employee that they'd allowed them the time in their workday to go and ask about this stuff.
And that is part of the problem, isn't it? Because actually, especially these days, with everybody being so busy, I mean, I know we like to think that, we all work smart and we all create time, but actually we tend to fill all of that time, and people are working, some people out there are working silly hours. And we get to the point where there isn't time to do this, and especially with, maybe in years gone by, people would have gone and, talked to people on the high street about this, but a lot of those people are disappearing. They don't necessarily have the facilities in the high street to where they are to go and talk to people. And as you say, just don't have the time. So, yeah, for an employee to do that, I just think is really sensible. It's really sensible because it's just taking off another worry, it's taking off another pressure, but it's also helping them build a relationship with their staff. It's showing that they actually care about their staff, not just for what they get out of them at work, but as people. And that's those differentials, I think, going forward, are the things that the generations that are coming through are going to look for. It's not just about the money. It's also about, how am I looked after here? What help do I get in living? What help do I get with planning for the future? And those are important things, because they're massive. These things are massive stress points for people. Massive stress points.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I used to work in the whole industry of HR when I was in my corporate career. And for a while I worked with Dr. Kerry Cooper, who was the one banging on about well-being in the years way before anybody else was thinking about it. And when, stress was becoming the major factor rather than back problems that was keeping people off work. And then there was this whole hoo-ha about, employee assistance programs, which is a phone number that's on the wall in the staff room that everybody ignores and nobody rings. and being able to buy more holidays and flexible working and bits and there's lots of tinkering around the outside, but a lot of it is there for the employees, but they're not actively invited to take part in it. It's there if you need it. Whereas when someone says, right, okay, this day we're going to get somebody in, so you all take an hour out, half an hour out in the morning or half an hour out in the afternoon, and whatever your work schedule, you want to take some time out to go and get advice, go get advice. And it's physically doing something, not sticking something on the notice board.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right, let's get to the nitty gritty then. So,
go on then.
is there is there a point where you're too young to start thinking about a will, or not? Is there a kind of an optimum where, or set of life circumstances where this is definitely where you do need to start looking at a will?
Yeah. Typically, the cry that I get from the younger people is, well, I haven't even got any assets yet, so what's the point in writing a will? And in those circumstances, you might not feel that you need a will, apart from it saves your parents, if anything happens to you, the process of having to go through the full probate process. But there might be some particular circumstances. So my daughter was the product of an abusive relationship, and I'm not betraying any confidences there. She talks very openly about it and about the issues that it caused her later in life. And without a will, if anything happens to her, we go through the legal process in this country, which means that me and her dad, who she has no contact with, are the ones responsible for sorting it out, and everything would be split between us 50-50. So she did her will to protect me from him.
Right.
Because no way she wants him involved in that process.
Yeah.
So it was to define, me as executor and where everything's going, just to keep him out. And that was really important.
That's very
So
interesting point.
it is down to circumstances. And some of them are odd. Not many people think of that as a reason to do your will, but sometimes it's the reason why. It's so individual.
Why do you think so many people don't have a will?
A lot of people, and only 36% of the population have got a will. That's the latest review that's been done.
Whoa.
Now, in COVID, when everybody suddenly went, oh my God, I might die, or I might end up in a coma, everybody rushed out and did their will and did their powers of attorney. And then we've all forgotten about it and we've all got busy. And I think part of it is, the average age to write a will is 58. But thousands of people die below the age of 50 every year. And they've not thought about it. So I think there is a belief that we're all going to live to a ripe old age and go to bed one night and not wake up. Or I have to say, and it is generally men, seem to have the belief that if I write my will, him upstairs is going to go, right, you're organised, you're next.
Oh, really?
And that's a genuine fear.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
God, does that have a word for that? I think because that sounds like it almost needs as a kind of, almost like a phobia. That sounds like it needs its own word. Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
But then I've got a client who didn't write his will because he didn't know where to leave stuff.
Right.
He genuinely didn't know who to leave stuff to. So in actual fact, what we did with him was we didn't do a standard will. We did a discretionary trust where he named his 3 people that he trusts the most and just said, well, if I die, they're in charge of the money. And here's a list of people. And it even went down to the barmaid behind the bar in the pub where we wanted to have a little something. Because that can be changed as he goes along. It's not written in, not written and that's it forever. As his life moves on, he can keep changing that, but he knows the people that he trusts to carry it out. So, it's all very bizarre. I tend to find that I have to say men are more afraid of the process than women are. And in a typical relationship, particularly where they've got kids, it is the woman who goes, right, stop faffing about. I'm going to ring her and get her in and we're going to sit down and we're going to do this.
Okay.
Because I guess we're nurturers.
Yeah.
We tend to be the ones that, I'm not saying now, but historically have been the ones that had to look after the well-being of the family.
Now, I've got another theory, and see, I'm going to test it on you and see what you think. Is
Okay.
part of it that what we do, especially if we are in a relationship, so if we're married, etc., and so therefore there's, if you like, there's two of us, and especially then, if you're then thinking about dependence, you're thinking, well, if one of us goes, it's then down to the other one, and then how are they will then need to have a will and they need to sort all of this out. But so that's that could be part of it. But then is there a second part of that where we go, because my parents aren't dead yet, right? It seems really weird talking about this, but if my parents aren't dead yet, and therefore I don't know what going to be inheriting from them, I kind of want to wait until I know what I've inherited before I write a will, so that I then know what I'm leaving to the next generation. Do you see what I'm saying? There's kind of a
I see. Yeah,
bizarre
I
logic there.
absolutely, yeah, I absolutely see what you're saying. And most people know somebody where their parents have written a will, and then one parent has died, everything's gone to the other, they've remarried, and hey presto, the kids don't get what they expect because it's all gone to the new wife or the new husband because it negates the will.
Yep.
And I think my view is you don't have to see writing a will as this is it and it's done and it stays in the box forever. I had a real epiphany the other week when I was dealing with somebody who's young, not been married, not got kids yet, but owns her own house. And what we've done is we sat down and we planned the whole thing, and we could have put trusts in place to protect her no matter what happened or whatever. And what we said was, actually, that's not what we want. What we want is an ongoing relationship that says, right, this is what you need for now. Let's keep it simple. This is what you need for now. And these are the circumstances in which we need to look at it. So
Right.
you're thinking of having a child in a couple of years, you'll need to review it then. And it's having that ongoing relationship where someone could just pick up the phone and go, Deb, do I need to make any changes? And going, no, actually, you're still fine. People think, oh, I'm going to be moving house, so I better not do it because the address won't be right. People can trace addresses. People get married, people change them. Well, your executors or your beneficiaries might get married and change their name. We can still trace them. There's some fabulous people called genealogists. And Joe Lander is brilliant talking about this. And they trace people and assets and debts and stuff for people where nobody does know what to do next. So I think it's getting into that mindset that it doesn't have to be perfect. What will do for you now will do now, but you need the education to know, if this happens, this is what I need to review. I have in the past got quite annoyed with family lawyers because they don't say to people when they start the divorce process, and by the way, you'd better check your will, which is really important. So it's about talking to the other people in other industries to make sure everybody knows that you don't have to wait to be at this point in your life to do this bit of paperwork. It's okay to do it now and change it as life goes on.
It's quite interesting. Whenever I thought about wills, it's one of those things. It's a bit like pensions, really. It's you almost feel like the further on we go with this, you wonder whether it shouldn't just become obligatory. You do it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That
Yeah. And I have an idea. Somebody told me once that having a will and or powers of attorney, and I could be wrong on this, somebody told me it's not gospel because I don't deal with that territory, that it actually is obligatory in Australia.
right.
I don't know. I don't know. Someone told me that years ago, and I've not researched it because I don't do Australian
Well,
wills because they're all
anyone that's
different.
listening over the next day or two,
Yeah,
if
please
you
let
do
us
know,
know.
do let us know.
Or any
Is
other
there
countries where it is obligatory.
yeah, but it
Yeah,
just strikes me as one of those things where, you know, you need it written down. You need a bit of paper. I mean, it's weird what we determine human beings need to actually document and get signed off, and yet other things which are still just as vital and important, we go, well, that's a choice. That's a
yeah,
choice.
yeah,
If you do that, you know, if you're, I don't know, if you're buying a house, you sign a contractual agreement with a bank, you do a more, that's obvious. You've got to sign that there. You know, if you get married, you get a certificate. When someone gets born, they get a birth certificate. All of those things you've got to do them. You've got to do them. So we make all of that around birth, marriage, etc. And then towards the end, when it comes to death, I mean, you've got to have a death certificate, but you're not around. You're not around to have anything involved with that. Surely the will part of it is the bit which says, because I'm dead now, this is what happens next for
yeah,
everybody else that I've been involved with. You just think, oh, that's that should be all tied together. It's
yeah.
it's it's
Because
incredibly interesting as a topic.
it's just, yeah. I mean, I go out. I mean, Monday night I'll be at going to be Hillfoot. A shout out to the Women's Institute. And I do know the words to Jerusalem because I realised after I first did a talk at Women's Institute, you do need to know the words. And talking to them, and I call it the weird world of wills because the first question I ask people is, why now? Why do you want to do this now? Um, and quite often they'll say, well, we decided we need to do the wills when we started a family. And then you find out their kids are like 10 and 15. But at least they got around to it eventually. And I had one woman who said, oh, I decided to do it now because 3 months ago I died on the operating table.
Ooh,
And she'd had a near death experience.
well,
And she'd come back from that and gone, right, sorted everything out. She'd done a funeral plan, she'd done
yeah,
her powers of attorney, she'd written her advanced statements as to what she wanted to happen, and did a will because that was the wake up call that she needed to go, actually, this could happen at any time. And I ask people if they do dangerous sports. Do you go skiing? Do you ride a horse? Have you got a motorbike? Because you're more likely to die or end up in a coma than your average Joe.
yep.
So sometimes it's about shocking them into it.
Mm.
And I
You,
do find I work very closely with financial advisors and insurance guys because the questions I ask, like, have you got a mortgage? Is it protected? What happens if you die? Can your family stay in the house? You know, and the same, they go, well, okay, you're planning your finances, so you're going to be secure in retirement. But what happens if you don't reach that point? So, I think we're getting better at all working together, but still a lot of education to do out there. And
yeah,
I still find it, people never cease to surprise me in what they believe will happen. And a big reason for people not having a will is, I don't need a will because it'll all go to my wife anyway. Well, that's okay, but it's the process they're going to have to go through. It's the difference between a very simple process that moves everything across and potentially a nightmare of paperwork and stress right when someone doesn't need it.
yeah. And they may not actually even be capable of doing it at that time.
Yeah,
You know, I think that's
yeah,
quite often forgotten, isn't it? Um,
yeah. And the same with parents. When parents get elderly and they may need to be looked after. They may need to be unable to manage their finances. They might need to have to go into care. The stress that causes on people who are trying to make a living and trying to build a career and trying to work. The saddest thing I used to find when I worked in recruitment was somebody who had gone out of the world of work for 2-3 years to care for an elderly relative. The elderly relative had died, and then they were going back, trying to get back into the world of work, and their confidence was right down at zero because they'd been in this stressful situation, trying to fight their way through and find out what needed to happen next.
And it'd be good to perhaps on another week get someone in from the care sector. Actually, I'm doing quite a lot of work with the care sector at the moment to perhaps talk about that aspect of it as well, which is, especially if one parent goes, and then the other parent that's left then needs to go into care. Where in the scheme of things do people have that conversation about what care costs?
Yeah. And what would you want?
And what do you want?
And what don't you want? Because, the biggest thing everybody says to me is, either I don't want my kids to put me in a home, or I don't want to put my mum into a home. But sometimes the physical circumstances just dictate that's the only feasible option.
Mm.
And it's that whole area. I put people in touch with other people there, because although I've worked in the care industry, and I used to be a senior in a nursing home, so I've seen the other end of it, and I've seen the dealing with relatives and taking people right the way through that final journey. But it's the paperwork and the unknown. Believe me, wills is the straightforward bit of it.
Yeah.
I would know nothing could drag me into that side of the industry. My little brain wouldn't cope with it at my age.
It'd be interesting to know whether that's generational to some extent, because
Yeah.
my parents have always said, if we need to, who's looking after us, right? You're not putting us in a home, right? And I've always said,
Because in their generation, they didn't, did they?
no. And I've always said to my kids, if I get to the point where I need that support, you're putting me in a home.
I say to my kids, just ship me off. Ship me off
if you can find, I don't mind. You can put me in a dusty corner somewhere. It's absolutely fine, because my view is that they've then got their lives to live, and actually you do not want to be seen as the person that took away part of their life or interrupted with their relationships or whatever, because you needed care 24 hours a day in their home, and they could never get out to the theatre again or whatever else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
But
the big
again,
thing.
I
I don't want
don't
to
think
be a
people talk
burden.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
No,
think people talk
we
about
don't
that
talk
enough.
about all of this. We just don't like to talk about anything that's going to bring the mood down, really. Which is why you've got to try and find, I always say that I deliver what I deliver with a big swirl of empathy, a slice of humour, and no legal babble. And that's what people need. It's got to be as straightforward as doing anything else in your life. Leave us
I'd
to
like,
sort out the legal babble. Leave us to do the complicated bit in the background.
yeah. The fact that you did that piece of work the other day with that company, I think is really interesting, and I'd love to throw this out to the community that are involved in well-being, etc., occupational health, that watch this on a regular basis. If any of you, has anybody else out there done any studies into this, and have, or would you be interested in doing a study into this? Because I think it'd be really interesting for someone to actually do a study on if an employee or employers, allow their employees access to this kind of education and resource, what it does for them in terms of mental well-being, etc. Because I'm pretty certain it would have a massive correlation. You know,
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain.
It's a stress.
Yeah, it's you know,
And it's a stress that people quite often don't feel they can talk about at work. But work is a massive support mechanism. Work is where you can have these discussions. You know, in my coaching, I've dealt with people who've retired, and they totally underestimate what a support mechanism, their work colleagues, the routine of going to work, the place of being at work, talking over those coffee breaks. They completely understate the value of that. So surely that's a logical place to find stuff out, not with somebody waving leaflets at you outside the supermarket on a Saturday afternoon going, have you got a will? Have you got a will?
Yeah. I think that's part of it, isn't it? I think we need to get away from the fact that we feel like we're being sold this as a product that's just going to, be another outgoing, and we need to fully buy into it as a whole process. And I do like what you say about, perhaps more will writers or companies offering a service need to actually kind of develop that ongoing support package for people to say, actually, let's write something, get it in place now, and then let's make sure we're dropping in on this on a regular basis to assure that this is where it needs to be.
And I think what my request for your audience who are in the care, the well-being kind of area is people do their document. For example, their lasting power of attorney that says, these are the people who can make my decisions for me. But actually, when you become an attorney for someone, where's the support that says, and this is what you can do, this is what you should do, this is what you need permission for, these are the records you need to keep, these are how you deal with these difficult circumstances. I'd love to talk to health professionals who are on the other side of that, dealing with the people who don't know what they should be doing, to see what we can do in that area, because I think that's going to be the next big thing. It's not a transaction. It's not a sale or a transaction that says, here's a piece of paper, stick it in a drawer. It's a service. And it should be an ongoing service. And that's something we, at the company that I work with, G&T Wills, that's something we're very passionate about, because both me and one of our directors, Paula, are attorneys for our elderly parents. And particularly with the health and welfare one, nothing prepares you for that. So that's the other missing bit. It's not, I'm not going to get on my soapbox about the will writing industry and about this whole corporate sales thing, and about you go in to do a simple will and you talk it up to the maximum level of stress that you can so that they buy the most complex product that you can. And I'm sorry, guys, but there are will writers out there who do that. But that's what's wrong. It's not like, you take your car for an MOT and you get your MOT stamped. That doesn't mean that you don't go near a garage for the next year. Things might still go wrong.
No, absolutely. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you. Lovely
What a
to
great
talk
way!
to you.
What a great way to spend Friday.
Yes.
I hope you're all feeling a little bit more informed. If you want to discuss wills, if you want to just find out a little bit more about what's involved, perhaps what you should be thinking about, what the options are, then do get in touch with Deb. I'm sure she'd be pleased to help. You can connect with her on LinkedIn. We'll be back same time, same place next week with more Wow Ergonomics. It could be physical next week. It could be mental. It could be could even be about death. We don't know. I decide during the week. But if you've enjoyed this, then please do share it with other people. And you can catch up on previous episodes of this at wowergonomics.com. until next week. And Stephen, I hope you're having a good time in Holland. Bye for now.